Madam Chair.
Mr. Shuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Chatterjee, what provisions should we, looking at future trade policies and agreements to ensure, what agreements should we be having to ensure that small businesses take advantage of the overseas markets?
So it's a difficult policy question. I think that there's two things. One is, despite all the fluctuations with currency, I don't think we can ever count on U.S. goods being the low-cost product in the market. I think we need to continue to focus on adding value to the products we provide. I think that's the only way. Even China, if you look at a recent article today in the New York Times, talked about how they're becoming a little too expensive for some folks and people are moving to Vietnam. And that process will continue to happen over time. U.S. cannot be sort of the low-cost provider. We got to add value. Question is how to do that. I think you have to have an active small business administration, an active trade procurement policy. You have to promote these things and work with small business to identify new markets. I think the gap right now is these industrial behemoths in China and India who need to be sourced. They need parts, they need supplies, they need people. American small businesses have an opportunity to source them. Investor services is one area I've been reading a lot about. We have an opportunity to provide all these new companies with the type of value-added services that the companies in their countries don't yet provide. So I think that it's a question of matching what we do well, which is going to be the high value-added services, to what the developing country firms need. And I think that's going to take an active partnership between government and business. There really aren't any easy answers, but I don't think we can rely on currency fluctuations alone to guarantee our competitiveness.
Thank you. Mr. French, what has been your experience with the rates and availability of equipment for in your dealings related to shipping products and exports?
Well, as I mentioned, the rates have been very much increasing rapidly. I think one of the other areas is this lack of availability of equipment. And if you can imagine the sensitivity of some of the products we do ship, like logs, that from your area in North Carolina, it basically killed the business if the freight lines said, well, sorry, we don't have any space for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and your product can't make it to the marketplace. So it's been the erratic and unstable ability to ship the product. And you can imagine, using wood, we don't have any alternatives besides the ocean carriers. So it's been an enormous, and of course the huge increase in diesel prices and the cost of inland transportation it has clobbered people. It's been, again, the rapidness of it, and the fact that we're a relatively low-value product has made us less desirable for people. Of course, if they're only going to take a certain number of runs in their trucks, they get the highest value cargo. So it's a low-margin industry, and we are more dramatically hit by all of these costs, whether it be insurance costs, freight costs, trucking costs. All of these things have a much higher impact, perhaps, than on the more value-added manufacturing. And we need to continue to promote our value-added manufacturing. It's one of the things we have to do to survive.
Madam Chair, just for the record, I'll be happy to yield.
If you yield, Mr. French, I want you to know that last month the committee held a hearing on freight and railroad costs for small businesses.
Thank you.
Yielding back. Thank you for yielding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the record, we talk about subsidies that China continues to give. I mean, we've seen through this administration, and still a continuation, the more money we borrow from China, the more opportunities they're going to be able to have to subsidize their companies. Mm-hmm. And so we have continued to see that over and over and over again. So we certainly have to put a stop to that in this future, and I'm looking forward to that in the very near future, that we put a stop to borrowing the money from China and other countries that continue to take our textile businesses and our manufacturing businesses out of North Carolina. We lost over 300,000 jobs in North Carolina alone in the textile industries. 300,000. And last comment, we got 10,000 permits on federal lands to drill. Have at it. We don't need AMWAR. 10,000 permits. 10,000 permits.
Would the gentleman yield?
Absolutely, since we're in an energy hearing.
Excellent. Does the gentleman know if on which of those 10,000 they've actually identified that there's oil there?
On 250,000 acres, we just had the hearing in Natural Resources. 250,000 acres, 10,000 permits, no incumbents from any type of environmental issues. They've been sitting there for 5 years, unwilling to. And on top of that, we export our own petroleum some 5.8 billion barrels a day.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, I don't know if the gentleman, maybe I didn't speak clearly enough, but when you say 250,000 acres, that's the total of all the permits, that's the acreage that's there, correct?
That is the acreage that is there that has been identified from the oil industry that there's available.
That there might be oil on.
There are available oils.
But they haven't determined on which of those places there is oil until they drill or until they identify it.
There's geologists that obviously that's why they've deemed it to be oil. I don't mean,
but I know
find
that
oil in North Carolina, but
if the gentleman will continue to yield, because I've seen this talking point out this past week, and I saw Rahm Emanuel talking about 68 million acres or whatever he's talking about that they can already drill, so they don't need to go in Anwar. But oftentimes oil hasn't been identified. That's just speculative as to where it might be. So it doesn't mean that there's oil on all those particular locations. So it's somewhat misleading when Rahm throws out a number like 68 million and acts like, well, we don't need to go in Anwar, the Outer Continental Shelf, because we've got all these places they're not drilling now. The fact is they don't know where the oil is necessarily.
Reclaiming my time. Thank you for holding this small business hearing, and we'll get to energy policy.
If the gentleman yield for a second.
I'd be happy to yield.
Gentleman. But I would like to ask a question to the ranking member. If we go into Anwar, will that bring us relief, immediate relief that we need?
Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes, I'm
okay. I thank gentlelady for yielding, because the point that I've heard about even if we drill in Anwar now, we won't see that oil for another 5 years or 10 years. That's why we should have done this 5 or 10 years ago, and I voted 11 times in the last 14 years to do that. So no, we're not going to have that oil for a couple of years. However, much of the price, for example, $58 a barrel to $140 a barrel in the last year or so, is speculation as to what we think oil is going to be available in the future. So if we passed, and I would urge the Speaker to do that, to allow Congress to have a vote, and we passed going into Anwar, I think you'd see an immediate impact in the price out there, because it would say that we're finally serious. And apparently we weren't very serious at $2.30 a gallon. We sure as heck ought to be serious at $4 a gallon.
Let me just say that there has been measurement, legislative initiatives that passed through the House are sitting in the President's desk, and others that have signed into law and has not been implemented. H.R. 6, for example.
Does that allow us to go in Anwar?
I'm sorry? No, we're not talking about Anwar. We're talking about price gouging. We're talking about providing relief to small businesses to be able to purchase technology that will bring their electricity consumption down. That is the type of legislation that has been signed into law and that the administration refused.
Well, the Chairwoman, Madam Chair, this is, of course, my first term in Congress. Could you just tell me which party was in total control of the White House, the Senate, and the House?
I'm sorry, I wasn't.
And this is my first term. Can you tell me which party was controlling the White House and the
For the last 12 years,
last
the Congress
12 years?
was controlled by the Republicans, and for the last 8 years, the White House and pulpit
I yield back.
has been controlled by. Well, I guess that we have to go back to trade.